Hi there, gaming buddies. It's winter in Finland coming at you with a new review of a recently released product, just last year I think, of a game that has become my favorite fantasy game of all time. That's quite a feat. So, the game that I'm talking about is this one right here. Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game where glory and gold is won by sorcery and sword. It's a thick book, as you can see, with some very retro artwork in the background there. Some kind of Viking with bell bottoms. Amazing. The price tag in the back here is $39.99, but I bought this, I think it was 45 euro, but games are always a bit more expensive when they come here across the Atlantic. So this is, like it says in the back cover, a complete role-playing game of 1970s Appendix N fantasy. So those things that were found in, I think it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Appendix N in the back of the book. All the things that inspired the creators of that game in making it. Things like Michael Moorcock's books, Tolkien, of course, all the different movies and other influences that they drew from. And this is basically a streamlined version of 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. It's faster, it's far easier to learn, and the thing I like about the most, the approach is completely different. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Pathfinder a lot. I think it's a wonderful system and it does what it's supposed to very well. The thing is, though, it goes into too deep into the crunchiness where things can be exploited very easily. It's far too much about the mathematics. Here we have a game that is actually impossible to min-max. Impossible to power game, unless you actually create house rules to do that. Here's the reason why. Things are way too random. You don't just pick like your attributes, select what points go where. You roll randomly. A lot of the things that you come across, you roll randomly. And this gives it a totally different feel. It's more erratic, it's more chaotic, it's more weird, but it really works. So, with that in mind, it does require its players and game masters to have a certain kind of mentality going into it. But overall, let's talk about the physical book first. So we have here well over 400 pages, and it's the contents are in black and white, but there are these nice artwork inline covers there. And the artwork is very evocative of that old school feel of those books that were around when a lot of the experienced game masters today were young. Like there, for example, you can see it's very evocative. It's not going for realism. It's going for yeah, just creating a certain type of feel. I'm going to go over this book chapter by chapter, and I'll explain some of the key differences to 3rd edition and other games. I might fumble a bit because this is a big book, and if that happens, bear with me, but I'm not going to go over every page, just here and there. Things I see I will mention. So there's the table of contents, by the way. Again, this is indicative of the feel they're going for with this book, where it's not, it's not, how would I put it? It's sometimes very tongue-in-cheek, but it's also purposefully trying to evoke that feeling of nostalgia. Thing is, even people who have never roleplayed before, I think they will find this book very appealing, because this sort of simplistic style, it's far easier to get into. It's not difficult to understand. So, introduction first. Core mechanic still uses a d20, of course. Armor class is ascending, and a roll of 1 is an automatic miss or a fumble of some kind. A roll of 20 is an automatic hit or a critical success of some kind. The system does not have prestige classes, attacks of opportunity, feats, or skill points. Those are just right out. Forget about them. Classes and races are one and the same. You are a wizard or an elf, like in first edition and D&D, but there's I'm going to go back to that when we get to the classes, but it's not as bad as it might sound to some of you. But attacks, saves, and skills all involve rolling a d10, adding modifiers, and trying to beat a number. 3 saving throws: fort, reflex, willpower, clerics, turn unholy, and so on. We'll go into that later. So the characters themselves. Well, actually, let's talk about the dice. This is very important. They use funky dice here, also called the Zoki dice, or I think game science dice. So that's the D3, D5, D7, D14, D16, D24, and D30, in addition to a normal dice set. This is because they use a dice chain. So if you, for example, get a modifier to your roll that is minus 2d, that means you lower the dice in the chain by 2 steps. So if you were rolling a d20, for example, for your attack, and for some reason you get a penalty, you go from d20 to d16 down to d14. Thing is, I don't own these dice. I've found them very difficult to order online. And you can manage just with your basic dice set. I'll go into that in a completely separate video where I discuss Dungeon Crawl Classics house rules and how I run it. But yeah, you can use a normal set, and they give some advice here on how to do it. Like it's not difficult. Once you and your players do it a couple of times, it's no problem. Not difficult to learn. And before we go into those characters, one more thing on abilities. Here you have strength, agility, stamina, and intelligence. However, here is where we deviate. Then you have personality, not wisdom or charisma. Personality is sort of a combination of those two. And then we have a completely new thing here with luck. And yeah, you have a luck score, and that might give you a modifier with your birth order. For example, if you were born under the harsh winter, all of your attack rolls get a luck modifier. If your luck modifier gives you a bonus, you have a high luck, you get a bonus on all attack rolls. If you have poor luck, you get a minus on all attack rolls. Simple enough. And luck can be used to alter dice rolls. And one other thing is that these ability score modifiers, the modifiers don't change as rapidly as in D&D 3rd edition. If you have an ability score of 9, 10, 11, or 12, your modifier is 0. And the highest modifier you can get is a +3 at ability score 18, which you can't go over by any means, and an ability score of 3 at the lowest end gives you a -3. And this actually, how the spellcasting and other stuff is made, means that just because you have an average intelligence, for example, it doesn't mean that you couldn't play an effective, completely effective wizard or an elf if you so wanted to, if you so chose. It's not that important, basically. It's a little important, but it's not critical. And yeah, the way character creation starts here is that you roll a bunch of 0-level peasants, nobodies, depending on the amount of players and however the game master chooses the scenario that he's prepared. These players might make as many as 4 or just a couple, 2 characters that go into this funnel. And the mortality rate of these characters within that funnel is very high. They have low hit points, they don't have any special abilities. Yeah, it's rough. A lot of the characters will die if it is at least somewhat challenging, and it's supposed to be. The funnel is basically the trial by fire in which these future adventurers are forged into being. So these 0-level characters are generated by rolling ability scores randomly, determining their occupation by rolling it randomly, and there is an alternative. You can choose from the occupation table here if you like. You can choose alignment, you buy equipment, you won't have much money, but there you go. And then you will attempt to survive your first dungeon or funnel, or whatever it is, the challenge that the characters are thrust into. And you will lose some characters, but it's not it sort of emphasizes this feel that, okay, you don't start out as a hero. You need to become a hero. You need to actually prove it. You need to do something to become a key player in the war between law and chaos and whatever else might be going on in your campaign world. So yeah, there's this, I'm gonna see if you can see this occupation table here. You roll randomly on this, and there's some 0-level goons trying to take on a skeleton who is just being way too snarky about it. So for example, you could roll here a ditch digger. You are trained with a weapon, shovel. Same statistics as a staff, but yeah. Your trade goods are fine dirt, 1 pound. You're not exactly Conan the Barbarian, are you? This is the thing that they're trying to drive home here. You're not a hero at the beginning, and you're not probably going to be a hero at the end of the funnel either, but damn it, you survived, and that's something. And actually at the back of the book here it says, "You're no hero, you're an adventurer." So yeah, that's pretty much sums it up. And like I said about the conflict between law and chaos, the alignment here is slightly different, where, okay, so there's law, there's chaos, and neutral. There's no such thing as good or evil or true neutral or whatever. No, this is where the old ones dreamed in the void. They dreamt up these creatures that later became known as gods. God set out to create worlds, and on these worlds they waged a philosophical and even a physical war against each other's forces. Yeah, and you with your alignment you basically choose a side, and that plays an important part in your character, no matter what class you might be. It's not just the cleric that has to worry about alignment. It's your outlook on what reality is and how it should be. So it's pretty important. Level advancement is actually pretty slow, by the way. It's well, it's not exactly slow, but the things required to you are required to do to advance, this is far more lethal as a game than most other fantasy systems. So getting those experience points can be quite the challenge, and that's partially why I like it. But the levels only go up to 10, but that's plenty. Yeah, so first off we have the cleric here. They choose a god, of course, and alignment effects on what god they serve, and what weapons they are trained with, and what they consider as unholy creatures. For example, a cleric that is neutral can turn, drive back, or outright destroy mundane animals, undead, demons, devils, monsters, for example basilisks, lycanthropes, perversions of nature like slimes, you know. So yeah, that's how it works. And magic works in a nice way here, where a cleric never loses their spells, but if they fail their spell checks bad enough, they gain disapproval. So that when they roll that d20, a natural 1 is always a failure and gains disapproval. If they fail the spell check, that also gains disapproval, and the natural 1 becomes a natural 2, a natural 3, natural 4. So no matter what the end result would be, if their disapproval rating is 14 and they roll a 14, that's an automatic fail. And this disapproval counter, so to speak, resets at the dawn of every day, or whenever they pray during that 24-hour period. But yeah, it resets. But thing is, with disapproval you might be tasked with, like, for example, okay, you gain a -1 to all your spell checks until you heal a crippled man. And that stays forever, until you find and heal maybe even a specific crippled man, but you will get a vision from your god or whatever. And yeah, they can turn unholy, lay on hands. Again, they can. This is the way healing works in this game, magical healing. It's lay on hands. There's no separate spell. You can do this as often as you like, but if you fail, guess what? You gain disapproval. your god may shut you out completely. It's not just that your god doesn't appreciate your advances or your prayers or whatever. It might be that your own faith has faltered, or that some chaotic energy is affecting the mind of a lawful cleric, whatever it might be. You can explain it in different ways. But lay on hands is also where the alignment comes in. It's very easy to heal someone who is of the same alignment. But if you try to heal someone who has an adjacent or even opposed alignment, you will know it instantly when you try to heal them, because your god knows. You might not be aware, but your god knows, and they will let you know. It's very difficult to heal someone who is of opposed alignment, and it's a sin. You gain much disapproval from it. So, yeah. But yeah, this lay on hands covers things like broken limbs, organ damage, diseases, paralysis, poison, and even blindness or deafness. So that's cool. And cleric titles, as it goes with most of these classes, are by alignment. A first level cleric of law is an acolyte. Of chaos, he's a zealot. Of neutral, he is a witness. So that again brings a bit more flavor to it. And yeah, this is a nice picture of some of those old creatures from beyond. There, haha. Yes. Then we will move on to the thief. Now, this is... Okay, they get the thieves' cant, but they also get thieving skills. Now, there are no skill lists in this game. Yeah. In fact, I'll show you later, the skills chapter is 2 pages. One spread. The only class that gets specific skills is the thief. And, of course, you rolls a d20 with these. Backstab, they get that. That's a skill. If they pull off a backstab, and they hit, then it's a critical. Yeah, it's very cool. And they can... things like sneaking, silently, hiding shadows, these are not opposed skill checks. So, for example, if you're trying to sneak past an orc, it's the same as you're trying to sneak past a dragon. Some might not like this, but I do. Because it's not what you're trying to evade, it's the environment. If you're going past the orc and it's just a stone floor, no obstacles, it's a very easy difficulty to roll over. But if you're sneaking past the dragon in the dragon's hoard with jingly-jangly coins all over the floor, that might be way trickier. And all of these skills are like that. None of these are opposed rolls. And they gain this nice thing where when they spend luck, instead of getting to add 1 point per luck point to a roll, they have a luck die that increases as they go up in levels. It starts out with a d3, goes up to d16. So by spending 1 point of luck, a 10th level thief gets a d16 to whatever they're attempting. And unlike all the other classes, aside from halflings, the thief's luck regenerates. 1 point every day. It's restored. That's really cool. That makes them these sort of bravado types. And here you can see thief skills go by level and alignment. There. At the top is the path of the boss, who's a lawful thief. Then we have the chaotic thieves, who follow the path of the assassin, and finally neutral thieves, who follow the path of the swindler. And so it goes. Yeah. And again, they do this nice thing where they explain what different sorts of thieves there might be, like what different options there might be for a character. Then we go to the warrior. Now, this is what the fighter should have been like in Pathfinder. For Christ's sake. Yes. These are very simple, but surprisingly diverse and absolutely lethal characters. Warriors get very few class abilities. They get mighty deeds of arms, and they are the only class that actually improves their critical hit range. For every other class and every weapon, it's a 20. You get a critical if you roll a 20. Or if you're a thief, you make a backstab. That's a critical also. But a warrior's critical threat range increases. And when they roll, for example, if they're 9th level, their threat range is 17 to 20. They roll a 17 and they hit with that. Congrats, that's a critical hit. Mighty Deed of Arms, they are different sorts of, well, these are what in Pathfinder are known as combat maneuvers. But the thing is, this is a bit more wider, and although there are the old trips and throws and all that sort of stuff in the combat chapter, you are also told to make up your own if you like to do something. And some of the examples given in here are: when fighting a chaos beast with a scorpion tail, a character attempted to chop off the tail. Yeah, can't use that stinger anymore. That poison attack is gone. Very cool, and it promotes this idea that the player should always be angling for another sort of maneuver, how to really screw over their opponent and stay alive. And they, of course, get the best weapon training. They get all sorts of different weapons. Yeah, and every class also has their own critical die, so that when they do get a critical hit, that's the die type they roll, and it references to a certain critical hit table. Warriors get the best critical hit table, of course, and wizards get the worst, naturally. Then we have the wizard. Speaking of the devil, this is a very neat system they've come up with here. Wizards, unlike clerics, they do not get their spells from a god in a direct way. They make a deal with a supernatural patron of some sort. It might be lawful if they're lawful, might be neutral, might be chaotic. It's quite often chaotic, but yeah, they make a deal. And in return of certain things, favors or certain actions later down the line, they gain access to spells and magic. Yeah. At first level, you get 4 spells, and as you gain more levels, you gain more spells. Slowly but surely, these spells are determined randomly, and there is an option for picking them, but again, why would you in this game? Supernatural patrons can be of all sorts. Bobok-Bubils, the demon lord of amphibians, the king of Elfland, fair ruler of the lands beyond twilight, Itha, Prince of Elemental Wind. These are just some that are in the book, and again, you are instructed to develop your own, as I have in my own campaign world. Wizard can also have a familiar, which is surprisingly beefy. It doesn't improve, it doesn't get any more hit points like in D&D, but it's very, very useful. And as they gain levels, you know, there are these action dice that all these classes get. When a warrior gains his second action dice, for example, he always rolls a d20, of course, but at 5th level, all classes gain their second action dice. That's a d14. A wizard can actually use that d14 to cast another spell that round, which is very, very useful. Then we have the dwarf, which is a different take on the warrior. Now, with these, we're coming up to the dwarf and the elf and the halfling. These three classes are what the most likely type of a representative of this certain race would go off adventuring. This is not the way all dwarves, for example, are in the world. They don't all have these sorts of abilities and this sort of layout of skills and so on. This is just a type that is either sent out or goes out to the world to adventure. With that in mind, dwarf gets a decent amount of hit points, almost as much as the warrior. They have a good weapon training set. Most of them are lawful. They also get mighty deeds of arms. They don't, however, get the critical hit expansion of the warrior, but they do see in the dark. They're slower than humans, aka warriors. They have some underground skills where they can, for example, smell the presence of gold and gems, which is a very cool idea. And they have an ability called Sword and Board, where they excel at fighting with a shield in one hand and weapon in the other. So at first level, they are one of the two classes that can have multiple attacks, because they can attack with the shield as well, with a shield bash. It's not a lot of damage, but still, it's an additional attack, and, you know, it's a cool idea. Then we go on to the elf, which is a fighter mage, as they used to say. They also have a supernatural patron of some sort. They also get infravision, immune to magical sleep, but they all are vulnerable to the touch of iron, so they can't use weapons or armor made of steel or iron, and they have to use, if they want to use a metallic weapon or armor, they have to resort to mithril, which can be a bit expensive, but luckily they can purchase one piece of armor and one weapon that are manufactured of mithril at character creation at no additional cost. So yeah, that's, at least they have been sensible about it, that they haven't screwed over the elf too much in there. They have heightened senses and so on. The elves presented here are they're not Tolkien, I'll tell you that much. And I really took this idea of these more sort of dangerous types of elves and just ran with it in my own campaign world, and yeah, it's nice. Then we have the halfling. And this is a different take on the thief, where again it's not Bilbo. You are a member of this short race and you get 2-weapon fighting. So this is another class that gets 2 attacks at first level if they so choose. Of course they have to use those small weapons, and they are slow because they are small size. But they also have one thief skill, which is stealth. They can sneak and hide in shadows, which is nice. But the coolest thing about them is that a halfling has an ability called Good Luck Charm. And as it says here, they are notoriously lucky. They can, their luck can rub off on party members, which is very cool. They can be a very big help. And again, their luck that they use, it is restored 1 point every day, which is nice. Now, yeah, this is the skills section here. Pow. That's it. 2 pages and most of it taken up by pictures. So yeah, making a skill check, when not to make a skill check. Most of the time you don't make a skill check. For example, and this is something that I've really had to sort of point out to my players when we started playing DCC, and we had been playing 3rd edition, 4th edition and Pathfinder before. When they said that they're gonna search the room, I didn't say roll whatever, I said how. And they had to describe, okay, I'm gonna start by checking any cracks in the walls, and yeah, that's how it goes. You ask for their actions, yeah, that's how it's stated here. And no search check is necessary, there is no search skill, and you only roll when there is something significant to lose, you know. For example, here, skill checks for common activities. Balancing, it uses the agility, so you would roll a d20 and roll with your agility modifier there. But yeah, that's, you don't roll balancing unless you might fall and hurt yourself really bad. You don't roll for it. Yeah, skills go by occupation, so remember those 0-level characters that had that starting occupation before they became an adventurer, like the ditch digger? Well, it is assumed that if you were a ditch digger, then you would have some sort of experiences with the world around you, what function you had in the world, in the society. A ditch digger might not have a very varied skill set, but whatever things that you could reasonably say that you are familiar with, you roll a d20 and add whatever ability modifier you want. If it's something that is clearly not part of your occupation or your background, then you roll a d10 because you're not trained in it. But for those of you that this sounds kind of weird, what you need to understand is that difficulty levels in this game do not go over 20. DC 5, that's child's play, that's very little consequence. Like with balancing, yeah, you might fall, but you're not going to take more than maybe 1 point of damage. DC 10 are a man's deed. Weak and unskilled could not likely achieve these. Kicking down the door and so on. DC 15, feats of daring do. It takes something special to accomplish these tasks. hurling a log at an oncoming bear, for example, as right here. DC 20, the highest you can go, are heroes' work. Only the most superhuman characters can attempt and succeed at these tasks. This is partially the reason why the characters feel so powerful, even at the very beginning of this game. Now, I'm going to cut this short here. Well, short, it's 40 minutes already, but be right back in part 2. I need to get a drink and go over the notes again. So, see you in a bit.